I want to think that AI is going to be this incredible tool for humanity moving forward, and that we're going to find a way to coexist and to solve these problems that face us as a species, to unify and create consensus on the planet whereby we become a better human race.
Welcome to SELINTalks, powered by Selin Club. I'm Shruti Verma, your host, thrilled to have you join us today. Today, we're venturing into colorful world of creative education with our remarkable guest, Alex. Alex is not just an advocate for integrating arts into education. He's a pioneer who's reshaped how creativity is woven into the fabric of learning. From the global stages of education reform to personal passions that fuel his projects, Alex's journey is nothing short of inspiring. So get ready to explore how creativity transforms education landscapes and why nurturing artistic expression is crucial for our next generation. So let's welcome Alex and discover the art of creative education. A very, very warm welcome to you on SELINTalks podcast. Thank you for being here, Alex. How are you feeling?
I'm delighted to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
All right. Growing up, what were the influences that steered you towards a career in creative education instead of more traditional path?
When I was young, and by young, I mean probably around 5 years old, one of my earliest memories was getting into trouble in school for wandering out of my classroom and round the corridors and into another classroom. And I still remember to this day that it wasn't out of kind of naughty, undisciplined behavior. It was, I had a real curiosity to see what was going on in the other classrooms, because I simply wasn't interested in what was happening in my classroom. And I think that sense of curiosity that I had as a young person had a double-barreled component to it. It was a bit of a binary in that I was super interested in the arts, and I was super interested in areas of the traditional curriculum, if you like, where I could express myself, where I could explore, where I could inquire. But at the same time, I was completely turned off, and I really didn't understand, at school at least, why I had to study all of these things that simply weren't of interest to me. And I think from those early years, if you like, at 5 years old, through to my A levels, I did art with art history and theatre and music. And those were the only things that I really kind of aspired to want to get involved with, simply because those were the things that made me feel like I was in my element. And I've taken that early experience, so my own educational experience, if you like, that educational career, if you want to phrase it that way, and have, I guess, made it my aspiration to address, or at least provide pathways for young people who are a little bit more like me, or were in the majority rather than the academic elite minority. And yeah, following that pathway has taken me to where I am now. And I'm not sure whether that was conscious, but it certainly is a passion and remains a passion.
I'm so glad. I mean, these are the kind of instances we don't know at that time, of course, because we're very little. But then when you go back and think about it, kind of shapes who we are now.
Absolutely, 100%.
Awesome. Moving from that early spark, what led you to specifically focus on integrating arts into education, and how has your journey been from working in the UK to expanding your influence internationally?
I went to a very prestigious art school, Winchester School of Art, and then I went on to Coventry School of Art and Design. I pursued a career in, I pursued an education in fine art, and I left. And very quickly, I went into teaching. I started with language teaching, and then I went into art and theatre teaching. But in the middle, there was a stopgap where I went back to my old A-level college as an artist in residence just after I'd finished university. And I saw the kind of impact that me coming in from outside had on the the practice that was being developed by the students there. So they were 16 to 18 years old. I was only young. I was only sort of 22, as it were. But I went into that environment and I really came alive. I taught for 7 years. I taught both the British national curriculum, international GCSE. I went on to run an arts department in an IB World School. And I did that for, as I say, just under a decade. I came to the realization quite quickly that there were needs that our young people and children had within those situations that I didn't necessarily have the knowledge to bring to them in an adequate way. So, for example, I had students who were interested in architecture when I was teaching visual arts, not an architect. So I remember very early in the process of running a department within an IB, International Baccalaureate context, that I was going out into the community to find the gaps in my knowledge so that I could bring it into my classroom. So that was kind of the starting point. And I came back to the UK wanting to do something, I guess, a little broader, where I could have more impact, or at least feel as though I had the possibility of having more impact. I got a part-time job working with Arts Work. So Arts Work, for your audience who don't know, that's the youth arts development agency that was set up by Sir Ken Robinson more than 25 years ago. And I worked with them to structure English National Youth Arts Network, which was something that I then went on to become a regional panel member, then a regional steering group head, and then eventually sat on the national steering group. So I was exposed to all kinds of thoughts and aspirations that many people working in leadership positions in informal education settings had regarding the need to have more art centralized opportunities for young people, not just because it's important for their development as individuals, but because it could be transformational, especially for young people who didn't necessarily feel that they were suited to or were getting the most out of a traditional school environment. That was at the same time I was working for Royal and Derngate. So Royal and Derngate was a big regional arts and cultural centre in the UK. They had a very, very impactful education and outreach department, and I was the creative projects and education manager within that department. And a lot of the work that I did then was about going out into schools, going out into communities, especially schools who didn't necessarily have the greatest resources for their students. Maybe they were on special measures. They might have demographics of students who were underachieving. At the same time, they might have students who were very academic and overachieving, who also benefited from engagement with the arts and cultural practitioners who we would bring in. And really that cemented it all for me. We were very lucky. We were nominated, sometime not even nominated. Our accolade was the Guardian's Regional Theatre of the Decade. We were twice nominated, once successful as the Regional Arts Centre and Theatre of the Year. So we were working with a lot of people who had the same kind of thinking about the power of the arts in education. And for me, it wasn't just a purely academic observation. I could see the reality of the transformation on the shop floor, if you like. And from that moment forward, that was really the pathway that I've stuck to, and led me to leave the UK and go internationally to help other institutions and schools develop programs of work that could have the same benefits.
Wow. Do you ever stop and think what led you where has been all planned, or maybe some of your choices led you, let's say in Thailand now, just taking an example, do you think it was all kind of woven perfectly, or were there any hiccups in the middle of all of this?
Oh, absolutely. There are hiccups for sure. I mean, I think after my time in the UK, especially with the collaborative work I did with Arts Work and working on some of the sort of national campaigns and otherwise, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was completely assured that we could really easily change the world. It was just the case that more people needed to know about the multiple beneficial, valuable outcomes that come from sustained, rich and powerful arts engagement and cultural engagement for young people. And that certainly has not been the case on occasion where you go into more formal and traditional educational environments. Certainly working internationally, the international education environment within international schools, it has Steve Siddell, who was a mentor for a while during COVID, who was previous head of the Faculty of Arts and Education at Harvard. He used to describe international education as being a revolving door. So you're always getting people coming in and coming out in different leadership positions or different faculty positions. And within that, you're going to meet people with different pedagogical positions, different philosophies about how things should work, and simply just how you say, like beating a drumstick or repeating a mantra about this is the way to do it because it's really powerful and really useful. It doesn't work like that. I think I've learned over the years that you have to hold people's hands sometimes. You have to be mindful of listening to why people have certain pedagogical beliefs. You have to demonstrate. You can't, rather than describe it, you have to let them taste it. And I think my own philosophy and position in certain situations has not been as a straightforward, convincing point as I would have liked it to have been.
I think once in a while we should think about it, where it all started. That's also a thing, right? Because a lot of times, because we're so much into the grind, and then there are so many other people also who might need help or something like that. But yeah, it's nice to stop and think about it.
Absolutely. I think reflection in education is really, really important. We don't do it often enough.
That's true. That is so true. That is why I love having these conversations. All right. So you have successfully integrated arts and education for creativity into traditional education systems in the school you've worked. How did you do this?
As I said, I was very lucky. I think my career was blessed by the professionals who I got to work with in the UK, and some of the amazing people I've worked with internationally. But the key ways I introduced systems or approaches, methodology, if you like, that people who haven't necessarily come from that same background, where they've blended the formal education experiences with informal education, a career path, if you like, has been about two key things. So number one, a long time ago, when I moved to the latest school that I'm at here in Thailand, I sat with them and they wanted to, quote unquote, they wanted to become the school on the planet known for creativity, which is a massive aspiration.
It is.
What we looked at doing was really setting about forming toolkits for faculty and educators, whether or not they'd come from a background that had space for creative thinking or arts-based lenses, or had experience facilitating STEAM-based activity. And that were those initial guidelines we called the 4 E's. So they were to engage, enliven, enhance, and empower. So to engage as a guideline, these 4 sort of guiding principles: provocations, getting young people excited by an initial experience, irrespective of what the subject area or the unit or the thing that you want to explore with them. You start with something that's going to get them excited about the subject. Enhancing things. So a lot of times educators, in particular, I think international educators, they can carry with them a suitcase curriculum. So they found something that's worked, and it's worked for them in a particular setting. So they take it from one setting to the next setting and the next setting, and they're just comfortable with that. And some of the young people get something out of that. So enhance as a principle is about taking risks, being open to failure, doing things differently, and leaving space for the unexpected, essentially. The third one, if I remember, is enliven. So that was this notion that you're going to make sure that as an educator with your young people in your department, in your division, in your school, you're going to make your learning visible. So whether that is as simple as taking it outside and making it into a display, whether it's taking the learning and sharing it in another class, whether it's taking the results of an inquiry or a unit and putting it as a stage production, whatever it may be or might be, make it visible, share it with other people. And then the last one is to empower, and that's really about individualized learning. It's about differentiation. It's about ensuring that whatever you're doing as an educator, you are making the time to allow each individual young person to feel as though they have a sense of purpose, that you're engaging them on their terms, not necessarily your terms, and that in doing so, you're developing, resilient and engaged and empowered young people. So that was a kind of the toolkit component, and then the model that sort of grew alongside that. Well, we started. It was called the GMTC, so galleries, museums, theatres, and cultural centres.
Okay.
Or I've started to call it MAGIC, so it's kind of museums, art galleries, institutions, cultural centres. But it's this sense that if you go to any large city, you're going to find great galleries, museums, and theatres, cultural centres, and so on. And the really good ones, and by really good ones, actually many and most these days, will have an education department. So they'll have a particular department that is tasked with making sure that education, schools, young people are a big part of their remit and their responsibility. And that's where I really found I developed the most in the UK was working in and managing the work of one of those departments. So my question really became, in terms of how it developed into this model, if galleries, museums, theatres and cultural centres understand the importance of education, should it not be the case that schools who are in the business of education should understand the importance of arts and cultural engagement? So it's kind of like it was a flipping of the model. So over a period of time, what we've attempted to do, to some degree of really quite amazing success, is to bring the necessary resources, e.g. the voices of artists and creative practitioners and thinkers and activists, into a space within a school whereby their thinking, their passions and their practice can connect to the learning that's happening within a formal education environment. And it's a very, very powerful thing. Nobody knew that this kind of learning laboratory approach would necessarily have all of the valuable outcomes that it has done. Not every project is as successful, but projects have a real impact. And I would say that the toolkit for teachers and that particular model are the two primary ways that I've tried to bring education for creativity into formal education settings.
Did you ever kind of face resistance from teachers or school board or something like that when you wanted to, kind of introduce this toolkit or any other, ways of implementing creativity in education?
I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that I'm the only person who is working in approximately this way, but I certainly think that the philosophy for the program that the Artist Residency Thailand program that we set up here, I think it is quite unique because it connects activists and artists and creative practitioners across departments and age levels and divisions. And because it does that, you're going to run into all manner of different humans. And human beings are fascinating creatures because we all generally can think differently. What I've discovered in the moments where there has been resistance is more often than not, and I would say by 90+%, by the end of the process, that initial resistance has kind of evaporated, fundamentally because from the idea of how collaboration might look, and it's not necessarily always connected exactly to the curriculum. It kind of agitates the curriculum. It can diversify the learning outcomes, and that can scare educators who want to know what the outcome is. How am I going to get from A to B, and how are my students going to succeed in the test that they do? Everyone by and large is still kind of obsessed with this notion of standardization. So there is resistance, but just as I mentioned before, I feel that when they see it, when they see the value that it has for them, and the benefits that they get, not just for their own personal teaching toolkits in terms of approaches they can use, but also the outcomes for the young people in their classes, the resistance is significantly less the second time we collaborate.
How nice. That's actually very nice. So you have drawn your inspiration from Sir Ken Robinson, a pioneer in advocating creativity in education. What were one or two key lessons from his vision that has really shaped your methods or philosophy?
I still consider Sir Ken Robinson to be the single greatest influence on my own kind of personal philosophy towards education. As I said before, I was so incredibly lucky in my time in the UK to work with lots of great people, but to lead the national campaign for arts work as a project lead and for Sir Ken Robinson to front that meant that I had some direct contact. It was through emails. We were meant to have lunch together, but sadly he passed away before we could do that. But the influence that I've had from his thinking, through the conversations, through arts work, the work that we did together, through the books that I've read, probably are, don't try and think that you can change the system head on. It needs to be bite-sized chunks. It needs to be grassroots. Don't underestimate what you can achieve as an individual simply by something as simple as taking a visible thinking routine into a classroom, making a small amount of room for application of the ideas that you're exploring as a teacher. First and foremost, I think celebrating what is possible in nurturing the passion of the individual young person in your class. I truly believe, and I can link it back to what I was saying previously about my own experience at school, that if you dig deep enough into the passions of a young person, you can find what it is that will create the agency for them to buy in to almost anything. And it takes time, and it's not as simple as coming into a group situation, a classroom or a learning environment of one type or another, and saying, okay, I'm going to go around each young person one by one, or that I'm going to just deliver in a transmissive way the information that you need to know and then regurgitate in a test. It's a balance. You as an educator are empowered to make a difference, even if it's on a small level, is one, and that you as an educator have a responsibility to get to know the young people that you're teaching and get to know them in such a manner that you can find what it is that puts them in their element and what it is that is going to create the most amount of agency for that young person.
It's very beautiful. All of the things, all of the lessons that you've said, actually kind of like you want to think, pause and think and kind of resonate with it. It's how nice. You've worked in UK, now you're in Thailand. Can you tell me the most shocking difference between UK education system and Thailand education system, the difference that you saw, and it came as a shock to you, maybe?
I would say that, I'm very lucky. So I'm based in an IB World school. My personal position is that most educational curricula flawed, mainly because even if you look at the IB, in the most positive light, and it is very progressive in places. When by the time you get to the diploma, it's still standardized.
Yeah.
And that's very much the case in the UK as well, with GCSEs and A levels. If I could point to another point of my career, I did spend some time in Hong Kong. I did a consultancy there. I won't name the organization, but it was a children's arts organization in Hong Kong that was pretty much promoting itself as its primary function being to develop creative thinking in young people. And that was the greatest shock of my career, to see. I witnessed 25, 30 young people being shown a model, and then with the help of several support teachers and a lead teacher, following step-by-step sequential instructions to all create the same thing, and being shouted at if they weren't painting it the correct color. And then 4 or 5 weeks later, walking out the door in a sequence where every young person had in their hand something that approximately looked the same as the person behind them. And then using that as part of a portfolio to try and access spaces in international education settings. So that I think was the most shocking thing that I've seen in my educational career, as one example. And then the fact that education is still, here we are in 2024, we're in the midst of an unprecedented technological revolution, and people are still so concerned with the notion of mechanistic standardized education. So that for me is still a real it's not a shock. I think in institutions by nature institutionalize people, but I do feel as though there need to be greater, wider, deeper, and perhaps more emergency level type conversations about what formal education systems need to do in order to transform meaningfully for the young people they serve.
It's still not sitting with me that this is how, the Hong Kong thing that you told.
Well, that was a decade or so ago, but my understanding is it's still quite common.
Yeah, but when you look at, it's supposed to be creativity. The whole point of it is creativity from your point of view. But my God. All right. The artist residency Thailand program seems like a cornerstone project for you. Can you explain how this program started and what unique education model it represents?
It's very much about flipping the model you would find in an arts and cultural institution. It started in a similar way that I brought architects into my IB visual arts classes all those years ago. I came into the school that I work now, and the brief was given that we wanted to make it the most creative school on the planet. So that to me is less about the hardware and the software that you run. So in the context of arts and culture, that was about people who I knew. So I went and initially I brought a handful of very skilled and inspirational practitioners who were professional artists of one type or another over to connect to the learning that was happening. So we talked a little bit about things that were happening in the school and how they might connect, and they came over and they connected through workshops and masterclasses, and then grew into working with people over longer periods of time to plan more sustained and comprehensive engagements. And then we set up a kind of a web portal interface where people could apply. And we went, in the space of just over 10 years, we went from, I guess, picking up my phone and my email list and going through the people who I knew who could come and support the work, into a program that now has some 500 inquiries and applications per year. So the artist residency Thailand model, this magic model, or this GMTC model, has grown in such a manner now, whereby we're invited to go and speak at conferences in March. I'll be talking about the work in Boston at the Transcultural Exchange Conference at MIT. We've been able to invite really interesting, highly acclaimed philosophers and artists and activists into the program, simply because they've got wonderful ideas and thinking to share with our young people. And that's always our starting point. I think I'll give you an example. So an English department might be studying Shakespeare. They might be, say, Romeo and Juliet. So they might go into the community and look for a theatre practitioner who can come in and do a workshop on Romeo and Juliet. And you might find similar mirrored examples in other departments. The wonderful thing about the Artist Residency Thailand program and this MAGIC or GMTC model is that we're now in a position that we can look at the hundreds of different ideas that come in, and we use that as the foundation to build the educational engagement for our young people, or the professional development for our faculty, or the engagement for our wider community. And sometimes it's all three of those things. And I think by starting with the ideas of the practitioner and building on that, you create an energy that your community come into, whether that's the faculty or the young people or parents or otherwise, that is unparalleled to what you might achieve by simply bringing in a workshop leader for a day or two. And the individuals that come and work with us, they're there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The last practitioner, we've just worked with Mark Randall, who's Associate Dean at Parsons School of Design in New York. I mean, he was with us for 5 weeks developing
That's
work.
Brilliant.
And the great thing is we benefit, the school benefits massively, the young people and the faculty get a huge amount out of it, but so do the practitioners. So the work that is developed by the likes of, say, Mark or other individuals coming in, they take those models and they have a life afterwards. There's a legacy to it. So they're given like a safe space, a laboratory space to develop work that's going to be beneficial to young people and schools and the education system as a whole, hopefully. And when they leave the program, they then continue to try different iterations of that work to deliver those workshops in other places. They've worked with us either as an individual or an institution. We have a great relationship with the International Schools Theatre Association. We developed global artist training with them that's been rolled out around the world. We've worked with the Almeida Theatre in London and their education department with them that they piloted here, that's then been rolled out in schools in the UK. So I would say that for me, those are the greatest triumphs and benefits from having this type of model in a school, in that it brings the world in, and then also the work that's created goes back out into the world, and there's a real beautiful kind of duality to that.
It's transformational to even just hear about it. I mean, you can only imagine these things happening somewhere, right? But when somebody is doing it on the ground, like you said, grassroots levels, it's insane, and it's brilliant. I'm really, really happy to hear that this is happening, and it's very interesting. I would love to know more about it. Also, the fact that all the stakeholders involved in this, parents, students, educators, your leaders, as well as the artists or people who are actually delivering the workshops, like you said, for weeks. That's a whole another tangent to this program, is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, like the amazing thing really is just the bespoke nature of each project, because it may be that somebody comes in, like we opened, like most international schools, back in August, and we've already had 3 practitioners deliver multiple projects across divisions and grade levels, and some of those have been about developing the skills of the individual artist. So we had a conservatoire-based pianist from Belgium worked with us.
Wow.
She'd never worked with electronic music before, or synthesizers or anything like that. She was an acoustic, traditional instrumentalist. She came in and the students taught her how to use the synthesizers.
Wow.
Kind of collaborated together. We had Janelle Engelstad from Make Art with Purpose in the US. She came in to develop predominantly her What is Empathy project, and wanted to sculpt it in a way where she could develop the work with younger people, because she could have got access to it, but that was a fundamental focus when she came here. And Mark Randall came with a similar focus, but wanting to also look at how his design process work, his design cycle work concerning human influence from bees, and how bees could influence design, and also influence the way we connect as a species was fundamental to his work. So every single project is bespoke, and the work that comes out of it benefits multiple stakeholders in different ways depending on the projects.
Yeah, that is what I mean. Usually what happens is you call somebody, they deliver, and that's about it. But the fact that they are learning, the parents are involved, the students are involved, the educators are involved, it's phenomenal. And the way that they're involved, it's not just communication, it is actually collaboration is what that is commendable.
We never guessed that it would develop in the way that it has, but I think what's been really interesting, I mean, our patron, Montri Dewakul, who's the founder of the school, has been so supportive throughout the whole process, that we've really been able to achieve a massive amount. But it's not necessarily what we set out to do at the start. It's just kind of organically evolved in this way. And I think what's most interesting at the moment, from an educational perspective, or contemporary educational perspective, is that so much of what we managed to achieve in working this way ticks so many of the boxes. For example, from the fairly recent UNESCO Reimagining Future Together report, because it talks about the need for schools to be greater parts of their community. It talks about this need for cultivating empathy. It talks about the importance of arts and culture. Kind of came out right at the moment, making it, not in the moment, as it were, making those recommendations at a time when we were discovering that the work that we had set about doing some 10-12 years ago was beginning to achieve these things organically. So that's very humbling as well.
Kind of reassuring, I guess.
And reassuring.
Brilliant. All right. So looking forward, how do you see the role of creative education evolving with the rise of AI technology? What skills should we be nurturing in students today to prepare them for a future where AI is unavoidable?
I mean, it's such a brilliant and timely question, and it's something that I'm so interested in. You know, the purpose of education is certainly post-industrial revolution and before, it's been about knowledge and understanding. And you can break that into sort of, declarative knowledge, and then procedural knowledge, conceptual knowledge, and epistemological knowledge. But certainly it seems like AI, it's got declarative knowledge down pretty much. Like, it can do it quickly. It's going to do it pretty much as broad as you want it to be in terms of the areas and subject knowledge that it can go into. It's got the procedural stuff down as well.
Yeah, that's true.
The conceptual stuff is coming. And it seems like if you listen to the likes of Sam Altman or Mo Gawdat, these people who are either at the cusp of the development of the technology or were beforehand, that what's coming up ahead is going to be very difficult to get in front of. So I like to consider myself an optimist. And I want to think that AI is going to be this incredible tool for humanity moving forward, and that we're going to find a way to coexist and to solve these problems that face us as a species. to unify and create consensus on the planet whereby we become a better human race. And I feel as though schools need to shift into an arena whereby we are cultivating the skills that are human skills. I mean, some people, I don't like the word soft skills.
Yeah.
But people would label it that. But for me, they're core human competencies, they're creative competencies, that the ability to share an idea confidently, to co-collaborate, to acquiesce and give over to other people's ideas, to solve complex problems in a group, but from a multinational context. All of these things you can do them. You can make space to do these things in schools.
True.
But you have to admit and be aware and just be mindful of, to make the space, other things have to get out of the way. And my feeling is the power that AI has to provide not just personalized learning, but individualized learning to a young person is very, very powerful. And we as humans, as educators, need to recognize that it, not on its own, not alone, but there are component parts of what an AI system will be able to do that's going to be better, because it's better to be learning and be guided in areas that you're interested in on a one-on-one basis. That's why people spend all this money on personal tutors, than it is to a class full of 30 other students trying to get the attention of the one teacher, or maybe a teacher and a teaching assistant who are there. So for me, I think schools need to really be thinking about what they can do to cultivate these core creative and human competencies, spending more time looking at developing personal empathy and compassion, collaboration, and understanding different viewpoints from different cultural perspectives. And otherwise, the social emotional component becomes more important. It's not just the AI that's evolving, it's the polycrisis, the things that we need to deal with as a species, that we need to be preparing our young people for. And the decisions we make now about what we do in our education systems and the skills that we engender and nurture in our young people, those are the choices that we make now that are going to impact where we go as a species in the future.
In one of these conversations, one of another podcast with Ephraim, he's a very good friend now. He also mentioned this thing that it's time to be more human. And like you said, it has to be more around, learning about different cultures, point of views, perspective, empathy. Boils down to one thing, that is, we need to be learning more about being more human than ever, because other things are going to be taken care by AI, like you said, the learnings, everything. But this is in the right direction. If we could achieve it, it'll be something else.
I agree absolutely. And I think the other important part to be so mindful of is that the AI systems grow on the information we feed them.
Yes.
So if we as humans are more empathetic and more compassionate and more able to collaborate and more able to see things from different perspectives, rather than to create this binary of, I don't know, I'm a liberal and you're a conservative, or I am left wing, right wing, whatever it might be, to this polarized reality in which we live in increasingly more. If we're able to combat that so that we become more compassionate and otherwise, then that's the information that the AI system is going to be feeding on, and that can only be good for everyone.
If only we think that mindfully. I mean, generally we're just making it learn from our personal point of views, but if we are really, really generous and humble and other things with it might learn.
I hope so, and I think that there's as much to be hopeful for as there is to be fearful of.
That is true. That is so true. That is something that kind of bothers at a very small level, but yeah, it does. Right now, it's a small level. Maybe we don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right. You're not just a mentor to others, you're also a creator yourself. How do you balance your personal creative projects with your professional commitments? This was one of
Oh,
my favorite questions I wanted to ask.
oh wow. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. So I kind of rotate, if that makes sense. So I rotate.
Okay.
I love cooking. I'm
Okay.
for me, I find it super relaxing.
Hmm.
I really enjoy being in the kitchen, cooking dishes that I know or experimenting with new things. So that's one thing. I'm just
Hmm.
looking around my apartment now. I got my kitchen just to the corner, but if I go for the next door, I go into, well, it's my dining room, but it also has a corner with my piano and electronic music equipment.
Hmm.
So sometimes I can get lost in sitting at the piano and playing music, and then if I slide the door next to that, there's a little art studio, and I
Wow.
do photography, or I've done a lot of photography in the past, and I also paint and I draw, and depending on the mood, I can flip between those three things. And interestingly, I think that's very reflective to some degree, other than the cooking, of the subjects that I also studied at school, because you've got the kind of performative bit there, I guess, of being in the kitchen. You've got the musical bit, and you've got the artistic bit. So they're all still there, and they're all I
Wow.
guess, a foundation supporting me continue to feel as though I have a creative outlet as well.
When you were kind of planning your apartment, was it this plan that, you'll have a studio, you'll have your piano near the dining room? Was it planned or it was just with the flow?
No, it's like most things in my life, it's very organic. So they kind of, although I did make sure there was a kitchen in the apartment
Ah,
before moving in.
lovely. Lastly, but not the least, I
Sure.
really hope to talk to you a lot more. Um, what's one piece of advice you'd give to educators who are just beginning to explore the integration of creativity into their teaching practice, or who have not yet thought about it? What would be the piece of advice for them?
I mean, the single greatest piece of advice that I could give would be
Hmm.
to don't be afraid to to take risks, celebrate failure with your young people in the risks that you take. If they don't work out, that's a great foundation for learning. Depending on the school and the education system, teachers are under a massive amount of pressure. They really
That is
are.
true.
And I think around the world, like we are in most schools still results driven. And sometimes teachers feel as though if I make space for creativity, I can't focus on the curriculum. That's less
Hmm.
time to teach the information that I know my students are going to need in order to pass the tests that they're in. And I am mindful of that. But what I would say is that even if it's just a visible thinking routine, and for your audience who aren't aware, if you go and look at the Harvard Project Zero visible thinking routines, they've got an amazing website. It's all completely free. Even if you can integrate just one or two of those into a lesson, then that's a starting point.
That's brilliant. I think I'm going to mention the visual thinking routine. If you have, you can share the resource. Otherwise, I'll search and for sure mention it in the caption somewhere.
Sure. They're very easily Googleable,
Hmm.
and it was Steve Siddell who first introduced them to me. He was a previous head
Hmm.
of the faculty of arts ed at Harvard, and the team's still going. They've got two new directors who just started about 6 months ago, and
Hmm.
it's such an amazing project because they are ostensibly finding practical ways
Hmm.
to integrate creative and critical thinking into the established curriculum, irrespective of where that is and what subject area it is. So it's, yeah, really.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for your nuggets, golden nuggets, and wisdom, and everything that you're doing. I feel very privileged to have this conversation, really, because I've always been, like you mentioned, you were when your childhood memory about, kind of going to another class just because you found your class boring and things like that. I've always been a kid who was told, no, you should do things according to the plan and things like that, but never turned out that way. For good and the bad, whatever. But yeah, I'm so glad to have this conversation. I'm glad that there is somebody, and then there are systems that are working for kids, younger people, to get their creativity out and flourish. So thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful speaking to you.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, and I hope we can connect again in the future.
For sure. Thanks for joining us for this energizing episode of SELINTalks with Alex today. We explore the vibrant intersection of arts and education, uncovering new dimensions of creativity that transform learning and values. Alex's insight propelled us through a journey of artistic integration and its profound impact on student development and community building. Keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in education and stay inspired to inject creativity into every teaching moment. Until next time, stay curious and empowered, and join us again on SELINTalks podcast by Selin Club for more enlightening discussion. See you in the next episode.